As a constitutional law attorney, former senior legal advisor and personal counsel to President Donald J. Trump, Jenna Ellis believes in the rule of law and the importance of integrity in our elections. And she's ready to tackle the big cultural and legal issues facing America. This is the Jenna Ellis Show. Here is your host, Jenna Ellis.
Hello, friends, and welcome to another episode of the Jenna Ellis Show. I'm Jenna Ellis, and so much is going on in the world here in the United States and, of course, abroad with everything from Ukraine to Russia and the drones from the United States. So a lot to talk about today, and my special guest is Jeffrey Lord, who has been observing all of this for a really long time. He worked in the Reagan White House and has been a conservative commentator since then, and I've gotten to know him through a lot of our media presence together. So he's going to be here to comment on a lot. And I also want to get into the responses from the GOP candidates, both announced and potential, that were sent to Tucker Carlson. And I think it's very interesting that Governor Ron DeSantis, even though, of course, he is not yet announced as a potential candidate, actually responded to Tucker's questions about Ukraine. Listen to how Tucker set this up.
Last week, we sent a questionnaire to every Republican presidential candidate, announced and potential, asking about Ukraine. We posed 6 questions. Is opposing Russia in Ukraine a vital strategic interest for America? What's our objective in Ukraine, and how are we going to know when we've achieved it? What is the limit of money and weapons you'd be willing to send to Zelensky? Have U.S. sanctions been effective? And does the United States face the risk of nuclear war with Russia? It's kind of presumptuous for a cable show to send these, but no one else in the media seemed to be asking them, and we thought we should. The first presidential primaries are 10 months away. Voters should know where their candidates stand on the big issues, and this in some ways is the biggest issue. So tonight we're happy to report that virtually everyone we asked responded. Nikki Haley ignored us. John Bolton said he was too busy doing some unspecified thing. But most of the rest of them did get back to us, and we are grateful that they did. In general, the answers were fascinating. Some of them were so thoughtful and so smart, they give you hope for the Republican Party. With only a few exceptions, their answers bore no resemblance at all to the statements you see every day from Mitch McConnell and various Republican committee chairmen in the Congress. Republicans in Washington tend to be committed neocons in the Hillary Clinton mold. But Republicans running for president this cycle generally are not at all. That was a surprise, a refreshing surprise. We had no idea. We didn't know what to think. So we're going to post every response that we got in full on our Twitter account tonight as a public record of where the candidates stand on Ukraine. We hope you will look at them.
So a lot to talk about today with my good friend Jeffrey Lord, and we're going to do that right after this. Legacy Precious Metals is the company that I trust to give you good and patient counsel for investing in your retirement. The Biden administration has caused a financial crisis, and they have no clue how to fix it. Oil prices have skyrocketed, and when oil prices go up, not only do your expenses go up, but the cost of transportation and shipping spikes, leading the prices of goods to rise. And we are already seeing record inflation. That's the last thing that we need. Our economy is in trouble, and you need to take steps to protect yourself. If all your money is tied up in stocks, bonds, and traditional markets, you may be vulnerable. So gold is one of the very best ways to protect your retirement. No matter what happens, you own your own gold. It's real, it's physical, and it's always been valuable since the dawn of time. Call Legacy Precious Metals today at 866-528-1903 or visit them online at legacypminvestments.com. That's legacypminvestments.com, where you can download the free investor's guide. You can also go to my Facebook page, Jenna Ellis. I am a public figure on Facebook, and I just posted yesterday a really great interview with the president of Legacy Precious Metals, who is discussing why you need to start your retirement account even if you're in your 20s or 30s. There is always a great time to protect your retirement and invest, just like you want to protect your health over the long term. So go to Legacy Precious Metals at legacypminvestments.com or call 866-528-1903. So joining me now is the man himself, Jeffrey Lord, who of course was a Reagan White House advisor. And so Jeffrey, I mean, where to start here? There's so much going on in the world right now, but I think we should start kind of with foreign policy and how the Biden administration, I think, is really not even paying attention to the war games that Russia is trying to instigate with the United States with the shooting down of our drone. And then, of course, with Ukraine trying to get us into that type of engagement with Russia. What is the Biden administration doing or not doing, in your opinion?
Well, the first thing that they're doing is giving an impression of weakness, which is what gets the world into trouble time and time and time again. I mean, you and I were not around on the planet when Neville Chamberlain was active there in the 1930s of Britain, but God bless him. My hero in life was Winston Churchill, who gave warning after warning after warning to the country that if they didn't toughen up, and their response immediately to Adolf Hitler, there would be war. And that is, of course, exactly what happened. It came on May 10th of 1940, and there is Hitler, invading Belgium and Holland and France, and he'd already invaded Poland and all this kind of thing. So they just didn't believe that Britain would stand up. And at that point with Neville Chamberlain, they were right. So, peace through strength, as President Reagan used to say. And I can give you an example with him. He was asked to put Pershing missiles in Europe and as a defense against the Soviet Union. He staunchly agreed with his friend Margaret Thatcher. So he went about doing it. Well, Jenna, I can only tell you, all the liberals in the world, all the far leftists took to the streets of Paris and London and New York, millions of people around the globe to protest. Made no difference to him. He stuck with it. And eventually, of course, that was part of the thing that enabled him to win the Cold War. So that is peace through strength. That is exactly what I'm afraid to say Vladimir Putin does not see with Joe Biden. And I think that's part of the problem. There's no way, Jenna, that this would have happened in Ukraine if Donald Trump were still in the White House. None.
100%. And I think that it must be so frustrating to be Donald Trump right now and seeing the absolute disaster that Joe Biden has taken this country in over the last 2 years, and even looking forward to another 2 years before we even get to the next presidential election. And this is why it was also so interesting to me as well to see the responses from not only President Trump, but also some of the announced and not yet announced candidates like Governor Ron DeSantis to Tucker Carlson with the situation in Ukraine. And they all gave very thoughtful responses. And I think President Trump, you could see his frustration come out in his response, which is totally warranted. But what was the most interesting facet of that to me? I think two things that I want you definitely to comment on. One is that Governor DeSantis actually responded, which I think has been the most that he has openly signaled that he may be a GOP contender for the nomination. But secondly, that all of the candidates who did respond, of course, Nikki Haley, Pompeo did not, but of the ones that did respond, they're all breaking with kind of this uniparty establishment era hawkishness. And they're saying, we aren't really articulating our goals in Ukraine well enough. And that has been a separation, I think, actually a good thing for the GOP.
Yes, I think so. One of the things that differentiated Ronald Reagan from neocons, as they came to be called, Ronald Reagan was very restrained in his use of force. The one time he used it was in Grenada, where there was an actual communist coup. I believe they killed the president of the moment, a freely elected president, and the communists took control, and he sent in the troops to the dismay in the beginning of Margaret Thatcher, because, of course, it's part of the British Commonwealth, and he didn't tell her. And she called him, and he's sitting there in the cabinet room with his colleagues in the cabinet, and she is literally giving him HELL, and he holds up the phone so that everybody can hear, and he puts his hand over the mouthpiece and says, "Isn't she wonderful?" But, he wasn't sending American troops to Nicaragua. He wasn't sending American troops all over the globe to fight. And he was able to persuade people by his words and other deeds that he meant business and don't go there with him. When you don't do that, this is what you get. And I think the Republican Party has got to sort of sort itself out, because I do think there's some disagreement with what they perceive, what some perceive as the neocon impulse to send troops everywhere in the world and all of this kind of thing. And we're going to have to sort that out. So I'm interested in Governor DeSantis's thoughts on this, because if, as it appears now, likely that there is a DeSantis-Trump showdown, that's going to play a real role in all of this. And, and one thing I'd like to say about these, a Trump-DeSantis showdown, all kinds of people are, fear and trepidation because Donald Trump has said A, B, and C nasty things or not nice things around Ron DeSantis. I've been around long enough in the world to know this is what happens in presidential primaries. And when you think of the animosity, just to name a few, in the Bush-McCain 2008 or 2000 rather showdown, in which it all came down to South Carolina, and they had a furious battle. And there was some piece of literature put out by somebody that pointed to the fact that John McCain had an adopted black daughter, and all this. I mean, it was ugly. They got their act together when it was all over, and George W. went on to win. I worked for Ronald Reagan, as you know. He had first this showdown with President Ford in 1976 that was pretty brutal. They came together. That was actually interesting because it was decided on the floor of the convention. I think that's the last time that's happened, when the Mississippi delegation switched from Reagan to Ford at the very last minute. So the night of the acceptance, Reagan was in the gallery with Nancy Reagan, and Ford called him on down, and he came down and gave such a great speech that some delegate was saying to the New York Times, "Oh my goodness, we nominated the wrong guy." And then 4 years later, it was sort of a repeat of this, except the establishment candidate, if you will, was George H.W. Bush. And he was going around saying that Ronald Reagan was dealing in, quote unquote, voodoo economics. I mean, it was pretty bad. But by the end of the convention, he was the vice presidential rate to candidate Reagan. So this kind of thing happens. Jimmy Carter faced off against 5 people, major people, George Wallace, Henry Jackson. There were others there in the Democratic primaries. And Jimmy Carter went on to win both the primaries, the convention nod, and the election. So my advice to people who are looking at all of this impending Trump DeSantis showdown, chill out. Don't worry. Let them do their thing. And it's helpful.
Yeah. And I think that a history lesson and kind of looking back over the scope of even recent presidential primaries and the fights, it really does put a lot of this in context, where I think a lot of the left especially would like to suggest that President Trump has been the only one to use this kind of, nasty rhetoric or, go to the mattresses and fight, which, this is just politics. I mean, and I haven't been in DC for nearly as long as you have, but even just in the time that I have been here, I have seen how dirty politics can be, but that's just part of the game. And everybody knows that if you, play in the mud, you're going to get a little bit on you. And that's totally fine. And everybody expects that in that sense of, the politics and I guess the debate and the showdown. But I don't think we're going to see a repeat of Reagan and George H.W. Bush, in the sense that I would really be surprised if Ron DeSantis agreed to be a vice president candidate to a nominee, Donald Trump. A lot of people are suggesting that. I don't see that.
Jenna, there's a problem that people seem not to be focused on, and it's called the Constitution of the United States. Both of them are at this point Florida residents. And at least I think I'm right about this. I haven't looked lately, but I think I'm right that they would lose, one of them would lose the electoral votes of Florida if they were on the ticket. If you recall, in our lifetime, when Dick Cheney left the Defense Department, he moved from Wyoming, where he had been a congressman, to Texas, where he became the chairman of Halliburton. Well, you move ahead to the time that George W., the governor of Texas, wants to put him on the ticket as his running mate, And what happened? Dick Cheney quit his job at Halliburton, moved back to Wyoming, and declared himself to be a Wyoming resident. Then everything was okay. So it's not as easy as you look now. I suppose it could be solved if Donald Trump, departs of his official residence in Florida and makes it his New Jersey club or goes back to New York. That might solve the problem. But there is a problem there that I think would have to be discussed before they went down that road. And frankly, I think, and you were there at CPAC, it wouldn't surprise me in the least if he picked Kari Lake.
Yeah. Well, and I've gotten a lot of interesting comments on Twitter and all of that for, my views on the propriety and the likely outcome of, some of Kari Lake's lawsuits, which I don't see those as being favorable to the election integrity challenges, because it's going to just simply further cement a losing precedent. But, we'll see about all that. But putting all of that aside, in my view, the reason that I don't think that Trump is going to pick someone like Kari Lake is because Trump is very strategic. If we go back to 2016 and looking at his choice of then, Mike Pence.
Right.
Pence brought the evangelical vote that Trump desperately needed in 2016. And that was kind of the signal to the evangelical community that, hey, I'm very serious about my promises about pro-life and religious freedom and some of these things that evangelicals at the time were just not convinced about, because a lot of us only knew him from, The Apprentice, for example. So Kari Lake, to me, doesn't bring anyone in that Trump needs that he doesn't already have.
That's a good point, Jenna.
And so,
very good point. Yeah. And aside from which, he's not elected to anything at this point.
Right. And I also see a very easy attack from some saying, oh, okay, well, this is just a losing ticket because Kari Lake lost the governorship in Arizona, and Trump, even though, of course, you and I would say that there were a lot of things wrong with the 2020 election, the outcome, of course, is that President Trump is not in the White House currently. So they're going to say, these are two losers. And of course, that's the term that President Trump hates the most. So I would see him selecting someone, even, not a Ron DeSantis anyway. I don't think he's going to select him for a variety of reasons. I would see President Trump selecting someone that brings in more of the suburban moms, somebody like maybe a Kim Reynolds out of Iowa, or, somebody who is a lot more, or even like a Sarah Sanders. I think she would be fantastic as a vice president. So
I agree. I think he might like to break the mold, as it were, and have a woman, or just a thought, Tim Scott. Mm-hmm. I think he enjoys throwing people off track and off their game here. And it wouldn't surprise me in the least. And, he said something the other day, and I forget whether it was at CPAC or later, but he said, and I'm paraphrasing here, that when he came in, he really didn't know anybody. And now he says, I know them all, the weak, the strong, the good, the bad, etc. That's a big deal. If you're going to be an outsider and be elected president, you really do have to have a feel for the town and the personalities in your party. I think he's got that at this point. So it will be very interesting to see how he goes about this.
Yeah, definitely. And, the interesting thing is a lot of people still characterize him as an outsider. And I think he's trying to run as an outsider, but he does now know everyone. And I think that cuts both ways, because on one hand, that's really good to say, listen, I'm not going to make some of the same decisions as 2016 because I know all of the players now. But at the same time, that means then he's really not an outsider genuinely coming in. But I think he views himself as the incumbent and as the presumptive nominee. And there's a lot of reasons that I think that's true, that he definitely is the presumptive nominee. But what I think is going to be really interesting is to see some of the polls that may shift once Ron DeSantis actually declares, because there's a lot of people that I'm hearing in Washington that really do support a Governor DeSantis running, but that type of campaign. And they're not yet, though, willing to go the Ken Cuccinelli route and say, hey, I'm off the Trump train. They're not willing to go the Chip Roy route and say, I'm going to do the pre-endorsement. But I think we are going to see a lot of former Trump advisors and supporters that do come out with endorsements as soon as Ron DeSantis declares. How do you think that may shift the response from President Trump and the perception, at least, that he is the, miles ahead front runner?
Well, I think the media will make a big deal of this kind of thing. And to be perfectly candid, if they were somewhere on the Trump train, but they're not a major player, the media will make them look like a major player, because that's just the way they are. But I just think, looking at these polls, and as you know, the CPAC poll there, he got 62% to just 20 for DeSantis. And then I saw one in the last day or two where he was way, way ahead. I mean, I just think that is his base is staying with him, is the shorthand for all of that. They're not going anywhere. I personally think that Governor DeSantis would be better to wait it out. And then in 4 years, I mean, one of two things will happen. President Trump will win, he'll be reelected, and he'll have to leave after 4 years because it'll be his second term, or he'll lose. And then I think that's probably it. He wouldn't run again. And then that's where Ron DeSantis, I think, could come in. But, it does sound to me like he is racing around, getting ready to do this. So we will see. But I just think President Trump is awfully strong here, and I'm for him. Not that counts for a lot, but what can I say?
It did, but I think it shows that you're right that his base is still with him, and that does count for quite a lot. And so, even though the media, of course, would love to say, Trump is over. I mean, they were trying to say that in 2015, right? So,
right.
The media is always going to be anti-Trump. That doesn't really count for anything. The RNC, whether or not they're trying to, make some plays in the background, remains to be seen. But you raise a really interesting point, Jeffrey, which is that for Governor DeSantis, this contemplation. Okay, I do agree with you that it's President Trump's nomination to lose. He is the presumptive, and I think everybody understands that. So in the scenario that President Trump does get the nomination, well then, if one of those two things happens, which is that he is reelected for another 4 years, in that scenario, would Ron DeSantis be wise to jump on as the VP? Because whoever Trump picks as the vice president, wouldn't they then be the presumptive nominee heading into 2028? And Governor DeSantis would then have to combat whoever
if
that
they can,
vice
if
president.
they can solve that residency thing. Yeah,
I think they can pretty easy. I mean, he could
I
go to New Jersey, New York.
Yes, I think it would. I think it would be great, because whoever is the Trump vice presidential nominee, they're going to be compared to who is already there in the vice presidency. And I think a contrast between Governor DeSantis and Vice President Harris would be pretty stark, pretty dramatic. And I mean, I'm reading all these stories that Democrats are rolling their eyes about her, and they don't know how to cope with all this. I think that they got themselves into this mess when they picked her because of her gender and her race, as opposed to her qualifications. And they had all sorts of serious people there that they, could have put on that ticket, and they didn't do it. And so now they're stuck. And I think one of the other problems, I was just seeing something about this, I think today somewhere, is that they're concerned about Joe Biden and his competency and all of this kind of thing. And if he did get reelected, what would this mean if he couldn't fill out the term? Mm-hmm. And I think, I think that there are a lot of Democrats who are really concerned about this. And I probably said this to you before. I think I did. But, having taken care of my mom who had dementia in her late 90s, wow. I mean, somebody like that, to be president of the United States, not good at all.
Yeah. And I'm frankly shocked that Joe Biden has remained in office even this long. I mean, I was anticipating, unfortunately, a President Harris long before now. And I think that the fact that he hasn't announced his reelection campaign, and the fact that Democrats are seeing how poorly Kamala Harris is performing in her role as vice president. I mean, this is what you get when you hire based on diversity instead of merit, and I don't think that they are going to want to put forward that ticket. I mean, if candidate quality matters at all, which to the Democrats it clearly doesn't. There's no way they would have put them up to begin with. But
That's right.
we know that candidate quality doesn't matter to them, so maybe they'll just go ahead and suggest.
And it's little things that you pick up on. I noticed in the last, I guess this week, she appeared on Stephen Colbert's show, and he was sort of asking her questions about what she does, and was clearly skeptical and all this. And I thought, my goodness, if
Wow.
even Stephen Colbert is down on her,
Yeah.
she's got some real problems on her hand, and her party has a real problem on their hands.
Yeah, well, it's just going to be so fascinating to see what the Democrats do in their own primary. And that people like Gavin Newsom and even Gretchen Whitmer and a few others are kind of chomping at the bit to jump in. And, they're kind of having to bide their time. I thought that Andrew Cuomo would definitely jump in. But of course, they had to Me Too him out of the governor's office there because they didn't want to deal with the fallout from the nursing home disaster. So, we still have a whole lot of time before the primary. And it'll be very interesting to see the route that Governor DeSantis takes if and when he decides to jump in. And, and he's got another problem in Florida right now, which is that the legislature is going to have to change the law that's kind of gone back and forth so that he doesn't have to resign in order to run for federal office as well.
Well, Jen, one of the things, and I've said this on occasion to people, when I was, not to date myself, when I was in the 7th grade, I was a geek and I loved following. My parents were in politics and I loved reading up on national politics and all this kind of stuff. And I went off to school, to junior high school, one fine November morning, and the political scuttlebutt of the day was President Kennedy going to be running against Senator Barry Goldwater or Governor Nelson Rockefeller. I get out of junior high school at 2:30 in the afternoon, and there is the news that he's been assassinated in Dallas, which changed absolutely everything. The lesson I took away from that is don't even think 2 years down the road, because today or tomorrow or the next day, the world can change big time, and you're not looking for it. You're not expecting it. And, you're going to have to cope with it. So, I'm always careful about that. In our day and age, I think the Ukraine thing, again, if President Trump were there, I don't think it would have happened, but he wasn't there. And it happened. And so now we're left, the entire world is left to deal with the consequences, which are not good.
Yeah, well, that's a really great admonishment to all of us who, are projecting and looking and already talking about, events 2 years down the road, that so much can change between now and then. So much can change even between today and tomorrow. So Jeffrey Lord, really appreciate all of your insights and your wisdom. And so thanks so much for having this conversation, and hope to talk with you again soon.
You bet. Anytime, Jenna.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Galatians 6:10 says, "Therefore, as we have opportunity, let us do good to all people, especially to those who belong to the family of believers." In Nigeria, there are 7 Christians being killed per day because of their faith in Jesus. Thousands are being driven from their homes on a regular basis. Some people like to talk about the problem, but there are those that do something to solve the problem. So I want to tell you about Equipping the Persecuted. This is a ministry that is actually helping persecuted Christians in Nigeria. Equipping the Persecuted is a boots-on-the-ground mission. They respond to terror attacks within 48 hours, bringing food, medicine, and relief materials. I can't believe all the amazing things Equipping the Persecuted is doing. They have an orphanage, support over 140 widows monthly, and they train and equip village security teams. I have genuinely never seen a mission like this. So I want to encourage all of you to support Equipping the Persecuted by donating $20 a month or more. Become a partner with Equipping the Persecuted to save lives. Visit equippingthepersecuted.org to donate today. Again, please visit equippingthepersecuted.org and become a partner in this amazing ministry. Legacy Precious Metals is the company that I trust to give you good and patient counsel for investing in your retirement. The Biden administration has caused a financial crisis, and they have no clue how to fix it. Oil prices have skyrocketed, and when oil prices go up, not only do your expenses go up, but the cost of transportation and shipping spikes, leading the prices of goods to rise. And when and we are already seeing record inflation. That's the last thing that we need. Our economy is in trouble, and you need to take steps to protect yourself. If all your money is tied up in stocks, bonds, and traditional markets, you may be vulnerable. So gold is one of the very best ways to protect your retirement. No matter what happens, you own your own gold. It's real, it's physical, and it's always been valuable since the dawn of time. Call Legacy Precious Metals today at 866-528-1903 or visit them online at legacypminvestments.com. That's legacypminvestments.com, where you can download the free investor's guide. You can also go to my Facebook page, Jenna Ellis. I am a public figure on Facebook. You need to start your retirement account even if you're in your 20s or 30s. There is always a great time to protect your retirement and invest, just like you want to protect your health over the long term. So go to Legacy Precious Metals at legacypminvestments.com or call 866-528-1903.
Have you ever picked up a towel set because it felt so soft in the store, but then when you leave and you go to use it, it's not really that absorbent? It's basically a towel that is leaving you out to dry. That's why MyPillow has developed the MyPillow towels that actually work. I know, it's totally mind-blowing. Towels that actually dry you. Their 6-piece towel set includes 2 bath towels, 2 hand towels, and 2 washcloths. They come in a variety of colors. I have the sage green and the white. I love them. And right now you can receive a 6-piece set for only $39.98 with promo code Jenna. That's JENNA. So go to mypillow.com right now and click on the radio listeners special. MyPillow products come with a 10-year warranty and have a 60-day money-back guarantee. So to receive this amazing offer on the 6-piece towel set of MyPillow towels, just go to mypillow.com, click on the radio listener special, and enter promo code Jenna, that's JENNA, or call 1-800-564-8475. That's mypillow.com, promo code Jenna.